At Round and Wound, we transferred the tapes from the archive of Stewart Copeland. We asked Stewart in turn if he would come and do a chat with us for our podcast here. Welcome to Rather Have the Story. A special guest today, our friend Stewart Copeland is here. And I'm hoping to get you a little bit out of your shell, overcome your innate shyness maybe.
That's tough. That's tough. Hard to get me out of my shell.
No, boy. Well, we have a few things to talk about. And right here, I'm just going to ask you a question. If a drummer loses one stick,
he becomes a conductor.
Aha. So that's what you've been doing. Conducting a bit. I'm ready. Go.
That means go.
Go.
This means be ready. Go.
Go. As you are now a full-fledged conductor, or maybe a semi-conductor.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a real conductor. Yeah. I do it on stage in front of a paying audience, but that doesn't make me a for real conductor. I can conduct pieces that I know, but I ain't going to be doing, Gotterdammerung anytime soon.
People think of that world, orchestral music, classical music in some cases, but yours is a pop version of that. It is. It's popular.
There you go. Thank you. As a drummer in that world, I am kind of a snob because of the insecurities that go with banging shit.
Percussionist, not a drummer. Yeah.
No, I'm a drummer, but I try, what kind of guy likes to hang out with musicians?
Yeah. The drummer.
Yeah.
But in this case, you're conducting, and I think people probably feel like that stuff is very intimidating and weird, but can you explain to us why it's actually kind of straightforward? What does a conductor do? How hard is it? Or is it relatively straightforward?
It's not straightforward. People in the audience wonder what the conductor's there for. He's waving his arm around, and it doesn't look like what he's waving has any attachment to what's happening. And that's because he has to wave before the event. Because in a band, the guys play all the way down the song. If somebody stops, it's like for a special effect.
Yeah.
In orchestra, because of all the different sections, the woodwinds, they lay out for 16 bars or 32 bars. The brass, they only come in at certain. So all of the choirs of the orchestra, the different sections, the different soloists as well, they are sitting quietly counting bars. They don't see the bars go by them on the page. They just see a slash which says 32. And they're not going rests. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 29, 2, 3, 4, 32, 3, 4, 30. They don't do that. The conductor says, okay, guys, you're coming up. And so he is sort of like the traffic cop in that sense, that they don't have to count their bars. He is there to tell them, okay, because they don't see what the other guys are playing. They have no idea what's going on during that 32 bars. The flute player, they have their flute, their little, then 32 bars, and they wait for the conductor for the next bit.
So you've given them a preparatory warning, get ready.
Yes.
Then a look or a nod or a
Well,
the stick.
if I give them the preparatory warning, they now know where they are and they can handle. If they enter on an uppy, they know where to come in. I don't have to think there. It's just like, okay, boys, you're ready now. But there's several other things as well. The energy level that the ensemble is performing at, it's either, or, they get a lot of emotional, dramatic information from the conductor as well. That's kind of the easy part because you know where it should be loud and quiet.
Yeah.
Tempo changes, meter changes are very tricky. The one piece that I do conduct has some tricky stuff, but I know it now and I can do it in my sleep anyway. And there are a lot of things that the audience doesn't see which happen in rehearsal, which is what the conductor does. So when the finished product, when you're sitting in the thing and the conductor's dancing around, most of the work happened in rehearsal.
We are currently touring our work with The Who. We're playing with orchestra behind. So it's a similar kind of idea. We don't have an orchestra that travels with us. You have a local orchestra. Each city you go to has the professional union musicians who don't yet know the music. And you do rehearsals during the day like we do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We meet at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Nice to meet y'all, nice to meet y'all. And we rehearse until 3:30, 4:30. Sometimes 5 on a good day. And they've got it. They unlike a rock band, which would take 2-3 weeks to rehearse a show, I pull into a new city, I got a new orchestra, never seen them before, the Atlanta Symphony, the Nashville Symphony, Vancouver, the Seattle, whatever. And have the charts in front of them, and their ethos, unlike our rock and roll brothers and sisters, who you get the right guy, tell them it's E, A, D, and they play that, and they kind of figure out a part that's cool. And if you don't like what he's doing, get a different guy and get somebody who's going to do something you like. The orcs, their ethos is to follow the page exactly, because if my oboe part, and it's not just what notes to play, it's how to play them. It's not da 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 da. It's da 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 da.
Dynamics, articulation, phrasing is drawn in too.
Exactly. So if they follow exactly the ink that they have for just their part, and that's all they're looking at is just that oboe part, they can be confident that all their brothers and sisters are also obeying the page, that they together will be the mighty Chicago Symphony. And their stature is how we all perform as one gigantic musical force. So that requires obedience to the page, which is why composers love orchestra.
Yeah.
You know, your bass player, your guitarist says, yeah, I feel like playing this, which is cool if he's the right guy and has a cool idea, but that's a different formula.
I'm curious about your background in that. Did you grow up with formal music training, staves on the paper?
I did. My father was a musician, a jazz musician, raised me to be a jazz musician, which is why I don't play jazz. But
rebellion.
The minute, you know, I was the fourth of 4 children, and he filled the house with musical instruments, hoping they would take. None of my siblings picked them up. I did. They were mostly broken by the time I got them, or I soon broke them. But I hammed it up on guitar, piano, drums, trombone, and so on. But as soon as he spotted that I had the bug, and by the way, it's not that I was any good at it, it's that, you know, if you have to tell your child, Horace, it's time for your trumpet practice, forget it.
It's no good.
If it's Horace, would you please stop playing that thing for a minute? You got a musician in the family. And my father spotted this and immediately got me into music lessons, so I learned the dots, and I learned techniques and so on, none of which I really used in my rock and roll career. I majored in music in college, and as soon as I got out of college, I never saw another sheet of music until my rock and roll career was over.
But it's like learning a language when you're young. It's easier if you come to it when you're young.
Yes.
But I think that there's something to it. You and I are in that world now, sort of as outsiders, but sort of knowing, but not fully experienced as they might have grown up. But it's not so scary. It's not so weird.
It is not so weird. Rock musicians and orchestra musicians are intimidated by each other. The rock musicians look at those guys who can read. That must put them on some higher level of musical consciousness. No, it doesn't. And the orcs look at rocksters and say, wow, those guys can improvise. How do you do that?
Freedom.
And all they, look, you just, you know, those 2 frets work well together. Diddle, diddle, diddle. Totally, 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 yeah! You know, piece of cake.
If you start with something like a drum chart, which can be complicated, but also if you looked at rock rhythms, you're like, oh, I've heard that before. I see what the beats are. There's kick and snare, 1 and 3. And it makes sense once you're in that language, you don't see it as intimidating. You see it as reinforcement, comfort almost.
I've tried to explain to classical musicians how this mystery, the golden key to improvisation is just know your scale and hit any of the notes in that scale and you're gonna be fine. And that still is a little intimidating, but I do have a fine arts ensemble with classical musicians and they just bust out and they feel so liberated and so empowered. But the reading part, I want to tell all my rock musicians the same kind of other direction. Reading is much easier than you think. It's not like learning Italian or French or German or an actual language. It's a much smaller vocabulary that you have to learn. It's really surmountable. And you know, somebody like Flea took it seriously, went and he got music lessons and everything. It just absolutely expanded his musical vocabulary.
Cool.
And it doesn't only expand what you can do, it expands how you can appreciate things. You know, I've got my mother, by the way, my father raised me to be jazz, which is why I'm immune to it. My mother was listening to 20th century classical music.
Ah, cool.
Stravinsky, Ravel, Debussy, Karl Orff. And I grew up with that music, but to read along, and I can see what they're doing as I know it, I'm hearing it, that intensifies the engagement, the immersion in the music.
One of the things I used to do in college was like pull out a Beethoven score, and then when you listen to that same piece of music, it's like somebody showing you behind the scenes of a Kubrick film or something.
Yeah.
You go, oh, that's woodwinds. Oh, they're playing thirds. It's so simple.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is so simple, but it's the execution of it and seeing how someone else puts together their sandwich. You know, they're adding a little bit of this, but none of that. And with your background and training, when you come to write now, you're probably using computer and samples to figure out what you do?
Yeah, I am in awe of those composers of yesteryear for two things. One is that they had to hear it entirely in their head because they couldn't have a recording of it. They couldn't, you know, they had to write it on a piece of paper and hear it as they're reading it, you know, visual stimulating their brain. And the other thing, just simply, how did they organize their page? When I'm scoring in Sibelius, I can decide how many bars per staff, per system on a page. And if I overcrowd it, I can yank it over to here. Beethoven, if he comes to the end of the page and he's still got a shitload more notes to put on there, how did he plan his page is the great mystery of that I would love to reach into the grave and ask him.
Fascinating.
You know, that's such a small technical thing, but it's huge.
It also has to do with mindset. If you've seen a Beethoven score, he takes his ink and he scribbles out when he makes a mistake.
Yeah, the page is hell to look at.
His passion and his personality is in there. And other people, like a French composer or Swiss or somebody, does these beautiful, it's almost like artwork. So their personality comes through in the pages. Now we use computers and you'll never quite know what that was.
No.
But it's easier to read.
My handwriting, I can write by hand, but that facility that you get from doing it all day, every day, I haven't got that. I can do it if I need to just make a note of something, and it's not on a computer, usually a rhythmic figure. I can do all that, but that handwriting thing of just getting it to flow and to be legible, because it's extremely exact.
Important.
You know, people write a dot, a quarter note, or an eighth note, the bubble part. It's got to either straddle the line or be one side or the other of the line. And if you're in a hurry, where is that? Because mostly it's a dot, you know.
We've been working on a book of George Martin's handwritten scores. And in those days, as you were speaking of...
How's his handwriting?
It's immaculate.
Well, he didn't do it on a computer either.
No, I call it the 3 Ps. Pencil, paper, piano. That's how people used to write.
Yeah.
And to do it those ways, again, you had this vision in your head of what things might sound like. They didn't get a chance to hear it until they were sitting in front of the orchestra.
And it's expensive to change your mind when they're all sitting there. You want to have it right before you get to the date.
And so going through someone's work like that, it reveals kind of their thought process. You also see changes, scribbles, which is a nice record of the past.
There's no undo with pencil, paper, and ink.
Exactly. Well, there's on one end of the pencil, you can kind of undo. But it's fascinating to see the personality come out, but also in the music. Your arrangements of this music that we know so well is kind of interesting. It's fun to pull them apart, as you did, and then put them back together. Some are probably very familiar to people, and other ones are definitely pulling out.
Well, I'm trying to get the right balance between familiar and fresh and new and interesting and intriguing. But I got to give them the familiar because that's why they tuned in the first place.
I came to see you play the Police Deranged recently, and I have to say, number one, it's a lot of fun.
That's what we're there for.
I mean, really, but I mean, your semi-animated personality on stage. You're not shy of moving, even when you're not on the drums, you're going around. And your drums are downstage on the right as you face the stage, probably copying Night Ranger, I'm sure.
Well,
that was your goal, but you want to be visible.
Yeah.
We can see you play from the side, which is actually a new revelation in the way many people have seen you play. You get to really visibly check out the drums as you do these songs.
Well, the classic drum position in the middle at the back you can't see what the drummer is doing. In fact, and it's the same with the other orchestra players too. I put in the orchestra score, please stand. If they're playing a lead line in the orcs, that's unnatural for them. They just sit there and nobody knows who's playing that oboe line because all you can see is the stands. And one guy's head might be going a little bit more, but that's it. The stand, you can see who the guy is. And they like it because they'll get a little ripple. One song, the most simple trumpet solo ever in Spirits in the Material War. The guy gets up and he goes da 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 da. That's it, and he stands up, gets a spotlight. When he finishes that line, he gets a ripple every time. It's the simplest thing he's played all night. Yeah, they know who's playing it.
But I think for those who are fans of your drumming, especially, I mean, it is what you want to see. It is you doing what you do well, but very visibly. And a lot of it, as you said, is the same or familiar. But then there are parts where you're stepping up. You've stretched out the song. You've made it longer. Almost improv going on at some points, which is cool. And then you have also a core band that travels with you.
The only improv is me.
I know.
The rest of them are absolutely obedient to the page, which means that I can fuck around. I'll meet you at the double bar line. I know where they're going to be, so and I know where they're going to be.
But those are exciting moments. You're doing fills. You're amping up the drum part, which is also new and fresh. But you also have a core band that you brought out with you because they make it the rock and roll side solid. They know what they're doing, and they're pretty hip people too.
They're pretty serious musicians. Armand Sabal-Lecco, who's played with Paul Simon, Seal, Peter Gabriel, all these people. Serious guy. And he's African, which he brings his Cameroon sensibilities.
There's a feel there, for sure.
That feel that's unique, and it just works for me. And we've been playing together for almost 30 years now.
But I'd like that you're also sharing the stage with them. It's not just Stewart and everybody else. They actually step up. They get to show off. They get to do what they do. And when you see a great musician, everyone knows it. It doesn't matter if they're all familiar with their work, but we might be familiar with the basis of this piece, but the bass line is different now. And it changes, and the way he plays it is so good.
He has a different feel.
And the guitar parts can be.
Rusty Anderson, no slouch himself. He plays with Paul McCartney.
Absolutely.
I can't afford either of those guys. But every Sunday morning on the bike path, three of us, the Chuckle Buddies, we're on the bike path, and breakfast is on me. They get breakfast for life.
We met when you came to our company where we transfer tapes for people, so old cassettes, reel-to-reels, whatever is out there, and then we were going through a big pile for you, all different periods, going back to this band called Curved Air.
Oh, yeah.
Way back when.
Mid-'70s.
Yeah, and this is progressive rock before the era we knew you coming out. Curved Air was pretty hip and pretty cool at the time. And I think that was an interesting progression from the world of progressive music towards this punk rock trend. It was a fad at the time almost.
Prog rock was sort of the extension of Jimi Hendrix, Cream, and where musicianship reared its ugly head. It intruded on pop music. Suddenly musicianship chops actually mattered for a brief window in time. It went too far. It became noodly and left the audience behind. Hendrix was raw with chops. Cream was raw with chops. But then when it got into prog, it started to get more about the musicianship and less about the music.
Those that did well, I think, wrote songs, but then what I meant was the fad was punk rock. It was the reaction against, and yet you stood in both camps, which is kind of weird.
Yes, a foot in either camp. I went from, all it took was a haircut.
Is it a dirty secret, if you're in punk rock then, to be able to play?
It was for the Police in 1977. We were soon busted as carpetbaggers. Sting and I were maybe 5-10 years older than all the other bands. We had played in professional bands. We knew how to hold an instrument and how to move air at a concert, which, when these young bands and the drummer's going do-do-da-do-do-da, and the guitar's going clanky-clanky, how to fit together and actually have impact, chest impact, that takes playing shows. And you don't get that. They had the stance, they had the look, they had the hairdo, but they hadn't played together on stage as music to get that cohesion that moves there.
It seems like the punk rock thing, though, was absolutely music you loved because people sensed when it came around the breath of fresh air, and there's something perfect about it. A good friend of mine has said there's no higher art form in music than a guitar, bass player, and drummer because that's the distilled...
In all music?
Well, think about it. It's the distilled, most potent, powerful, like The Who 1969,
Yeah.
or Cream, or The Police. There's these things where what you get done in there has three strong personalities being heard. They're listening closely to each other.
There are no passengers.
It's not Wagner, though, where you have enormous amounts of people. It is very distilled, like having a concentrated syrup or something. That's the most potent you can get, but stripping it down to a piano and a bass player, maybe not quite as amazing.
Well, music is a very basic human function. And I did a series for the BBC, What is Music? What's it for? Why does Homo sapiens do music? Why do I live in this big house here? Because society rewards me so richly for making music. It's not protein, it's not medicinal. What is its purpose? Evolutionarily speaking. And it turns out it's our mating dance, for one thing, but also social cohesion. Music brings people together. It makes people believe stuff, which is why it works so well with religion. Yeah. It excites people, which is why people march to it. Music is the only art form which can physically usurp motor control of your body and force you to actually do very strange body language, which is overtly sexual. Music will move you in that way like poetry won't, like movies won't, like literature. There's no other art form that will actually grab you by the pelvis and make you thrust your pudenda in public.
If you think about culture going way back, there was always some kind of ceremony in villages where once a month, maybe during the moon, you get to go crazy. You get to be an idiot. You get to jump around. Often with drumming, trance music is a good example of that. But we have it with raves now. We have it with dance clubs, the disco scene, anything like that, or a punk rock show with a pit in the front. You're allowed to be insane for about 90 minutes, and no one will judge you, which is fascinating.
Well, going back to your point about the purity of a small unit, the reason I brought up all this musicology stuff is because all humans can make music. We were really good at it. No other primates can make music the way we can. Even if we're not all Eric Clapton, you can hold a tune and dance in time to music. Everybody can.
Yeah.
Humans can do that. And so the real thing, we've evolved to the point where I get to specialize, I get to do it, and you get to pay to watch me do it. But that's not natural. The natural state of music is around the campfire, everybody doing it. It's not specialized, doesn't need to be specialized. And so three people doing it together who are really virtuoso, or just three buddies in a living room strumming acoustic guitars, that's real music.
We were talking about rhythms and releasing your body. There are some people that play drums who are what I would call a timekeeper type person. Very steady, very uniform, and in a way
much beloved by all the other players, by the way.
That's a kind of thing. It's a person you hire for that job, and quite often, let's just say disco records or something. That was your goal, was to be as steady as possible, to be as repetitive, metronomic.
And then we all got beaten for this visceral thing, which is the pulse that humans dance to. You would think this most primal, deeply instinctive, deep instinct. You'd think that humanity would create but no, we humans respond to a machine doing it better than any human. How about that?
I think that's the trance element. When something repeats so much that you don't think about it, then suddenly you tune out and you become in a trance.
Yes.
I mean, I Feel Love, the Donna Summer sequence that goes over and over again. Because it's so stiff, that's why EDM and things like that have done so well. It lets you tune out. But your style of drumming is a little different than the timekeeper dude or gal who.
Shit.
It's different. How would you describe it? I kind of know what I think it is, but what do you think it is, the way you play?
Extremely instinctive. When I'm playing a show, much to the consternation of my bandmates, and I try my best to remember to play it the same way twice. For poor old Stingo, he's got to sing his beautiful song, and recently I've discovered how beautiful his songs and lyrics are by working on them. He just wants to sing his song, and could you give me something solid so I can, I'm not that guy.
Like a carpet underneath, the steady thing.
And I see him playing with Josh Freese and with Vinny Caliuta and all these people who give him that, and he's a happy guy, makes me happy. I'm not that guy. Over his left shoulder is World War III going on. I'm all about instinct, here, now. This is just what happens. I'm not thinking. Some part of my brain knows that the chorus is coming up, it's getting closer. Here it is now, we're at the chorus now. Some part of the brain knows that, but I'm not thinking about that at all. It's all instinct.
Listening and reacting?
And by the way, those records, after the first album, the drum parts were completely spontaneous. I never heard the song until 20 minutes before recording that drums that you hear on the record.
Yeah.
That drummer heard the song for the first time 20 minutes previously. As Sting is showing Andy the chords and Andy's figuring out the voicing and messing with it, they've got their heads together. I'm kind of listening, tapping on my knee, and then, okay, let's do a take. Usually about second or third take, we got it because we had very short attention span. The drums are fine because they can redo all the guitars. They redo from a month. They'll spend on the guitar overdubs, getting the right amp, the right sound, the right guitar, move the pickups a little. The drums, whatever I came up with right then and there, is written in granite. But there's an X factor because I'd go on tour. And I'd figure out, now I know how to get from the chorus down to the verse. This is how I should have done that. But you know what? The record kind of worked.
Of course. It's instinct and listening to what's happening around you at the time. Was your choice of that conscious, or is it how you are? Did you listen to other people and say, I don't like that? I don't like the way those people do that?
No.
Oh, it's just how you are?
No. I tried mightily to be the guy that, because in bands, I'm not the most popular type of drummer that most bands want. I'm kind of a pain in the neck. I take up too much audio space. I'm not that solid platform.
Let's list those famous drummers that are. Keith Moon, Ginger Baker, etc. You couldn't put them in other groups a lot of times.
Yeah, and most bands would rather just have Mr. Meat and Potatoes so that they can shine, so that they can do what the real business is, which is the song, the lyric, the melody, and all that stuff. Just give me a beat, God damn it.
Please.
And I'm not that guy.
There was a period, I started in recording, doing engineering and things. The 70s was a period of a certain kind of drum sound. And in my head, I think of a big leather wallet that sits on the snare drum.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the sound. They wanted this steely
back.
band, fat, rich and dark.
Fuck back.
Dark. And then they would put all kinds of products all over the drums to make them muted and dull. And then your sound came along, and I remember it being weird. I remember it being unusual, and also engineers, producers, other people were like, that's different. And I don't know if it felt that way to you because of how you are, but there was a big sea change of things from this kind of lively, unmuted sort of drum sound. And it seems like we were talking to a guy who does all the fixing of drum machines, vintage Kais and Linn drums and stuff, and he said, my number one request was always, give me that Stewart snare drum on a chip. That's what people wanted.
You can actually get it because that snare drum, which is right there, I played all the records on that snare drum.
Did the Pearl?
Did all did all the, and finally I got it cloned, and
good.
You can buy it in any store now.
What made a Pearl, which is not like the most revered drum?
Well, I had it back in Curved Air too. I've seen photographs of Curved Air, and I zoom in. Yep, that's that same snare drum right there. And I played all the Police records, all the Police tours. It wasn't until decades later that I sent it to Japan, and the metallurgist analyzed the metal, the curvature of the, and I discovered, I had the wrong rim on it. I had on one side was the rim it came with, and the other side somewhere I replaced the rim with some other flanged rim. God knows why but finally they were able to crack it. And now you'll find them in studios. It's forgive the expression, it's a hit drum.
It's a thing.
It's a thing. Like they got a Ludwig Black Beauty, and they got the Stewart.
I do believe that even Owner of a Lonely Heart is your snare drum sampled from a record, and they put it on their hit because they wanted something.
That's my good buddy Trevor.
Yeah, of course, and his Fairlights. You know? So it became a thing, but I do remember...
Well, going back to what you're saying a minute ago about the fat back, was this sound in the mid-'70s of the snare drum and the kick were almost indistinguishable.
Dark, heavy.
And with Curved Air, producers came in and they would tell me, okay, go take a hike, we'll fix your drum sound. I'd come back and it just dead. And that's why the minute I got out of that environment and I didn't have an engineer tuning my drums for me, crank it up so high as to bring a bird down out of the sky, it was kind of, that drum sound was absolutely a rebellion against the fat back.
And I think it's gone kind of that way where the tendency now for most drummers is to let their drums be what they are, to speak out, to ring a bit more. They might put a little gel here and there and do
got
something
a little gel.
Yeah, and it helps. But in contrast, stopping what we're both saying about you, I remember watching A Music War, great film of really cool bands at the time, and I was looking at your drums, I'm like, did they say something on the drums? Does it say something on the tom-toms? And it said F off you, see you next Tuesday, right? Is what it said on the toms.
It did.
Who put that there?
I put it there. And it was not intended the way people think it was intended.
Okay.
People saw it as a message to another bandmate. It so was not.
Okay.
That expression, I hope you got your bleep machine ready.
Okay.
Fuck off, you cunt, was just something that English musicians say to, to each other.
Yeah.
Fuck off, cunt.
Or even to you.
Or to myself.
Yeah, it's your point.
And it was just sort of like an expression to the world, and it was not addressed at any of my esteemed colleagues. It was just, I was there at a sound check, signing autographs. The record, they're fiddling over the guitar sound or something, and the record company spots his opportunity, gives me a bunch of albums to sign, and I got a Sharpie. I've still got the Sharpie, and they still haven't fixed the guitar. So, there's only one thing. Fuck off, you can't.
Now that's we use that word around the world, I assume other people do, but it's a very UK English expression.
It is.
And there's something about that insult. You can call someone an idiot or thick or stupid or something. It's a very blunt attack. But when you say that word, the C word, it's very pointed, like hitting him with a chisel. In America. It's a little bit meaner.
Yeah. The English language has the F-bomb, which has kind of lost its power because it's so ubiquitous. It's a verb, it's a noun, and it's an adjective. It's just like probably the most useful word in the English language.
Flexible.
So we don't really have, beg your pardon?
Flexible.
Yes. Italy, I hope you don't have any viewers in Italy. Any Italians, hold your ears for a second, because I will utter an expression that the Italians will be absolutely mortified by. If you use this word on public media, your career is over. I'm going to say it. Italians, porco Dio.
Uh-oh.
And it translates as pig god. Doesn't sound like much, does it, in English? But man, I wish we had an expression like that in English that has the power. Devastation caused by that. The Italians have something truly precious, which is some verbiage that will burn down the house.
Absolutely.
I wish we had that.
I remember going through your tapes, and there was a 1-inch 8-track, so probably a lower budget studio, and it was a recording of 2 songs for the first single. 8-track, Fallout, and a song called Nothing Achievement, which I really loved that one too. And these are your tapes, because you were not with a record company yet.
No,
right?
I was the record company.
Yeah, right. And this was Faulty Products?
That's right.
Was that what it was called?
No, Illegal Records.
Illegal Records, put out by Faulty Products eventually.
Faulty Products, which is my brother had a music empire. He let me use his Rolodex and his phone, and I would call up record stores in Birmingham and Newcastle and
shop it out.
And they would say, is it punk? Yes. Has it got a picture sleeve? Yes. Is it hostile? Yes. Send me a box. Because kids would come into the store and say, where's the punk? And there'd be the punk rack over there. And they'd flip through, and they'd never heard him on the radio. They just buy the most hostile looking single covers. And we did a lot of business. I actually saw royalties, which I never saw in Curved Air with a real record company and everything. I never saw any royalties, of course not. But selling these boxes myself, I was actually able to split the money up with Sting and Henry.
Amazing. And this is Henry, the original guitar player you started working with as a trio. But you play guitar on those singles still?
The first one.
Rhythm guitar.
Yeah, but I kind of muscled my way in there. Henry was just looking a little bit dubious. And since I was the only one in the band who'd ever been in a studio before, was sort of the boss of the recording, I said, I tell you what, I'll play guitar in here. And so I did, because I could. When Andy joined the band, that was the end of my guitar.
Well, he had a lot of experience.
Career. Except that I did find on my home recordings, there's one track, It's All Right For You, where I've got my home demo and I'm blasting away. Check that out. against the Police recording, and it will reveal that that's the same guy. That's the same guitar with the same pickups, with the same rig and the same feel. And so what happened on that day was that I don't remember exactly, but what clearly happened was that I recorded the backing track and I just played it myself, and they just came up with a guitar solo and a lyric on top of it. They're too lazy to actually play the song, so they played it on top. And I'm fond of saying from my guitar playing back in the day that, you know, if I never would have gotten to like Andy Summers level, but I could have been in the Ramones. I could have totally played in the Ramones. But for one afternoon, I was the guitarist in the Police.
I think that's an interesting inversion of what people think, because this is the Police. It's officially that name. It's 3 people, although one is different. But you're the songwriter at that point, too.
Yeah.
Which is not what people expect.
Fortunately, that was a short-lived reign. I had a hit at that time under the name of Klark Kent, which was a secret identity thing. And
how did you meet him?
And because the Police were so unhip at the time, that's why I had to hide behind a fake identity and a mask, and it was kind of a fun story and everything. I played all the instruments myself, even sang. Now, I never sang in the shower. I never sing in the car. I don't even listen to vocals. I listen to the riff and everything. But there I am singing, and we get on the radio, and I actually had a hit as Klark Kent.
Klark goes on top of the Pops. That's how big it was,
yeah,
right?
In fact, the first time Sting and Andy were on national TV was as my backing band,
there's also
miming to my parts,
and there's somebody
with
else,
masks on.
There's some other mystery person in there doing your drum parts, right?
Well, there was Florian Pilkington-Mixa, who was my predecessor as drummer in Cur Dare, and our Kim Turner, who later became our tour manager. But that was their first time on TV, was playing that song. But the Police were kind of unhip at the time, and Klark Kent, I was having a hit on my own, and I was just at the point of thinking, I don't need these guys. Thank God Klark Kent disappeared in the nick of time before I parted ways with the Police. Because right the next day, Can't Stand Losing You, or one of those, Roxanne beat me up the charts by 2 points, and then the rest is history. Police came on like a locomotive and ate everything in its path, including Klark Kent.
True, but Klark Kent is still viable, and we've been going through the demos and hearing some good stuff. A few of them I actually prefer the demo version, which I think is pretty hip.
Well, I do actually, one of my favorite things, which will probably come out in a Police Deluxe at some point, is I've got those Klark Kent songs with Stingo singing them.
That's right, I forgot
and
about
it's
that.
only because of the greatness of my heart, the kindness that I feel within, the consideration of the man. He does have some dignity, and he did not deserve have my crap songs. You know, he did it for me because we're friends and because we didn't have any other material.
It's historical.
It's historical, yeah, but I've got him singing Don't Care.
Klark even had a music video, which I think got to be crazy expensive back then. Hard to do then.
There were a couple of them. Let's see, the first one for Don't Care.
Yeah,
I've got
that's
the top
what I
of
know.
the Pops. Then there was another one, Away From Home.
Away From Home is the one I'm thinking of. Yeah,
which were shot in my basement
just
of my house.
walking around, and somebody edited it together.
Well, the standards were low. All, you know, the audience expected basically you hose the band down with a camera and that's your video. That's how the Monkees did it.
Yeah.
And you just sort of walking around in the park doing silly things, and that was all people expected out of a video. So the standards were low, which is why I was able to get away with doing those and just basically handing it up in front of the camera.
These old tapes we went through, some of it is going to be coming out, right?
Yes. There is a Klark Kent Deluxe, which is all of the Klark Kent tracks plus the demo of those tracks, the home demo, which I had this idea back in the day, releasing the Klark Kent album on green vinyl.
Got it.
On the Kryptone label. I did have the idea back then of releasing brown vinyl on the Craptone label. Ooh. And this is the demos of everything.
Vinyl's back, you can do it.
Yeah. I don't know if any factories are doing brown vinyl.
I would say if somebody doesn't like Klark Kent, you won't love the demos. But if you're a fan of the Klark Kent project, which I know a lot of people are, that the demos are more of the same and even a little weirder, if that's possible. So.
Well, I had, first I had a Revox A77. And
which is like a 2-track stereo tape machine.
It's a 2-track tape machine, but it had a function where you could record on track 1, and then you could bounce this track onto track 2 while adding another element.
Playing a new part live.
Playing a new part.
Yeah.
So you've got your rhythm guitar here, over there, you put the rhythm guitar in there while adding a bass, then you bounce this back over to there, adding, so you got your bass and guitar there while adding another guitar and bounce it back and forth. And it's getting mushier and mushier every time you go back and forth, the signal to noise ratio, which kids these days probably don't even know what that is, because digital doesn't have signal to noise. Basically, but on tape, magnetic tape, there's a hiss. And every time you go over it, it's doubled. And then you go back, it's more. So eventually it gets very hissy, which, by the way, slight diversion, is why on Rolling Stones, Beatles, records of that here, the tambourine is so loud because at the end of all that, they only had these limited number of tracks. The drums have gone, so they'd add a tambourine for a sparkle at the end of the day.
To add back what they lost. And you're bouncing 7, 8 more times on these Revox things.
Yeah.
Mono, 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 it comes out together. Although when we put the tracks up, the cool effect of it is they're slightly delayed from each other as you add the last track.
Yeah.
Let's say it's a vocal. So you can actually make a sort of pseudo stereo by moving the tracks together in time.
Yeah. Well, when you copied from this track to that track, it's the playback head on mechanically, the playback head is here, the record head is there. So there's that little gap between them. It might be really small, but it's an audible gap. So the two tracks are out of sync by that amount, by the difference between the record head, which is recording the new stuff, and the playback head, which is feeding the old stuff. So with modern technology, we can slide them back together, and we got stereo again. But then one day, I got the TIAC 4-track.
Now, that is an expensive item at the time, too, though.
Oh, my God. I got it as a result of Klark Kent. I went down to my publisher, Island Publishing. I got to have a 4-track, and I found one in the store. And they sent a check, and that day, that was the first reward I had for my music, apart from my salary and curved air. This here was, I made a piece of music which earned me this toy. And I took that 4-track home, and now I had 3 tracks. Then I can record 3 tracks.
Over to one.
Which left me the other 3, and it just was a big blow up.
You're basically repeating what Les Paul had learned all those years ago of combining tracks, layering, and the early ones have to be like a warm track, like a bass or something on the bottom, and the last track would have to be your vocal or something, obviously, that wants to cut through. But it's funny that those do come out and they're listenable and they're cool.
Well, there's the vibe. I mean, I'm not an audiophile. I've got mics, and as a hobby, I'll try and get a better microphone, but that's just a hobby. The main thing is the X factor of whatever song you're playing or material you're playing or how you're playing it. And that doesn't matter if there's a little hiss around it. Doesn't matter if it's not high fidelity. It's the vibe that counts.
I think it's something to capture. This was a TIAC 4-track you had? Was that the basic machine? Kind of revolutionary for so many musicians, going to a proper studio. But now you can work out songs that actually have individual parts and play around with that and practice your guitar leads on top of your rhythm guitar and things like that too.
When I had these tapes here, and because I'm a charlatan, carpetbagger, dilettante, I did consider just adding a little because I can.
Oh yeah, modern.
But here's the problem with that concept was that I was a much better guitarist then than I am now. And so I wouldn't have been able to improve on anything because actually that kid, I couldn't play drums all day every day because you got to hire a studio. They're noisy. The drummer doesn't get to play his instrument. So what's he going to do? Play guitar. And so a lot of drummers play pretty good guitar. And I played guitar all day, every day. I didn't play drums all day, every day. But the guitar playing, like I said, I could have been in the Ramones.
I was thinking about that, listening to the Klark Kent way back when it came out on the green vinyl, thinking, this guy could do guitar tracks for anybody. Like literally, as rhythm goes, because you're rhythmically oriented compared to a lot of people, it's right in the pocket. It's what you want, in a way.
Well, my lead guitar I never developed it. I didn't spend the hours that lead guitarists have to spend. It takes a certain kind of autism to get that good. But my rhythm, oh man, I was like Stevie Ray Vaughan. I could have been, a little bit of practice, I could have been Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Getting there, which is good. That's a great goal. The Rocket 88 company makes cool books. They make kind of artsy books. And I understand you're making a new book with them, which might have some of this music incorporated.
Yes, it is. The book is comprised, it's kind of a coffee table book, which is comprised of my diaries from the period. Every date we played, every day, how much we got paid, how many people showed up, how well we played. I've got the receipts for the truck because I was managing and tour managing the band as well, and also hustling dates. And it's all there. I've got it all. And, every member of the band, Sting, Henry, Andy, my brother Miles, the journalist who introduced me to Sting. Everyone's written their book, and they clash in several ways. But I've got the receipts.
You got the proof.
I've got the absolute receipts of what happened on what day and who was there.
But I think you're putting some music with it too.
Yes,
That's
well,
the
the
cool
music.
part, though.
Well, when I write in the diary, September 29, 1977, I went back and hit the Revox and wrote a song called Such and Such. I've got that recording. And so some of these recordings are on the fancy version of the book. And there's the book for, I don't know, whatever a normal book costs. Then there's the upgrade for stupid money more.
Yeah.
It's autographed and has this disc in it with these home recordings.
That sounds like the cool one to get, I think.
Yeah, then there's the one even more outrageously priced where you get the autographs, you get the poster, you get the disc, and I'll call you up and talk dirty.
Wow.
Pay extra for that.
You were in the Doors.
Briefly.
Yeah,
And
but
wrongly.
That's something.
That is something. I was there as a fan, but as we've discussed previously, I am not the right drummer for every band, and I am no John Densmore. John Densmore had all kinds of panache and it's the lightness of feel, but mainly he provided a trance, and it just was relentless. I haven't got the patience for that trance. I'm too busy, and it was not a good fit.
And this is,
I got the honor of playing with the Doors, and to sit there with Manzarek and you know Krieger, I can't believe I'm doing this, but it wasn't the Doors with me.
and it was Ian Astbury was singing at the time.
He was a spitting image.
He's got a vibe, and it works as a personality too. But I think Densmore was one of the interesting ones because when I listened to him, he plays verses on the ride cymbal. And then when they go to "Come On Baby," he goes to the hi-hat, which
What do
is
you know? I
exactly
never even-
backwards from other people.
There was I playing his stuff, and I never even noticed that.
Yeah, and yet it also feels more jazzy to me than most drummers did.
A lot of drummers describe themselves as jazz musicians. You know, Ginger Baker thought he was a jazz musician. Charlie Watts said, "Oh, no, I'm really jazz." Come on,
I know.
you're in the fucking Rolling Stones. You were the epitome of rock.
He's
drumming.
Charlie Watts. Yeah, exactly.
And same with Ginger Baker, dude.
Or Neil Peart. It was like, I love jazz, but it's your.
Well,
yeah.
Neil Peart was not so naive. I mean, he understood.
Sure.
And the reason they say that is because jazz for rock musicians is like being classically trained. The serious musicians, oh, I'm into jazz.
Yeah.
And for me, that means nothing. I was raised to play jazz, and I escaped from it as soon as I could. But it is comedic for me, you know, when Ginger Baker would describe himself as a jazz drummer. And I did have words with him about that. You know, come on,
Right.
you know, Mr. Baker.
Yeah.
You know, let's get real here. You thump, thump, thump. That ain't no, you know, Louis Belson. That ain't no Joe
Krupa.
Morello.
No,
That ain't
yeah.
no Krupa. That ain't no Buddy. That ain't no Philly Joe Jones. You know, that is strictly Ginger Baker.
And to be fair, and I don't think people like to admit it, but jazz drummers are the next level up. They can play rock if they wanted to. They could play country. They could play shuffles.
No, they can't.
Well,
No, they can't. No, they can't. They mostly, I mean, those who describe themselves as jazz drummers,
maybe that's
but
the
who
same.
weren't,
Maybe that's
they
the same
could.
problem as rock drummers saying I
Well,
play jazz. Jazz drummers.
Jazz drummers
don't have the
usually
right feel.
They're usually too finicky for pop music. But two drummers, John Densmore and Mitch Mitchell, actually they're the only two who actually could be described as jazz drummers. Mitch Mitchell, playing with the heaviest guitarist on the planet, was playing very light and effervescent. And those were jazz chops that he was playing with, a very light, you know, effervescent kind of feel. And the same with John Densmore, is he did have that light swing kind of feel. But all the other people who describe themselves as jazz drummers, I don't believe it.
There's something in drummers' personalities. I think that's very attractive to people.
Warm, generous, kind, with
Shy,
good with
yeah,
children.
quiet. but I think that when I think of drummers, we were talking about Neil, who used to come here. Neil Peart used to come here.
He banged the shit out of these drums right
bet.
here.
And Taylor Hawkins, another good friend of ours, RIP for both of them. But there's something about drummers where it's a physicality. I like them on record. I love them. I love to watch them. Keith Moon, if you were just playing Keith Moon and you played like that, it would be a boring Keith Moon, even though the parts are the same. It's the physicality of how Dave Grohl plays drums, or Taylor, an example. It's like there's a physicality of watching you play and how you give it a little extra accent and your body brings it. It makes that part even more enhanced, like an exclamation point.
It is very physical, and I never realized this fully, Well, I did notice, how come when we go on stage, I'm in shorts and a t-shirt, anything else and I'm just burning up? How come he's able to go on stage wearing a jacket?
And a coat.
How's that possible? I discovered how that's possible. One summer in Italy, I got to play with a band where I got to be the front person. I got to strap on a guitar, hit power chords on the flank, sang all the songs. I'm at the front of the stage, and I got Adrian Ballou over here, and Mark King playing bass, and his drummer, Pete Ray Biggin from Level 42. God, that kid's got some chops on him. And I'm playing guitar, and I could be wearing a jacket all day. And I'm looking at that kid working. I think, geez, really?
Yeah.
It's so obvious to the guitarist how less hard the work they're doing is, and how much more work it's so obvious. But none of the guitarists are ever let on of how easy their job was. But the drummer physically carries the band every yard down the highway. And I once brought this up with a producer friend of mine, Trevor Horn, and his response was, "Yeah, I hate it when the drummer gets tired."
Oh, it's hard.
So empathetic. But I mean, playing guitar is a lot of fun, and you can hit a ring and look handsome for 4 bars. But the drummer's got to play all those 60. It's just physically. I think that's why drummers are generally healthier and live longer.
Sure.
Contrary to the meme of the drummers expiring and exploding.
There's a bit of that. We were talking about The Who before, because when Keith Moon left, every drummer in the world thought, there's a job I would like to have. I would like to be the drummer in The Who. Okay, well, that's smart of you, because it is fun to show off, and it's fun to be a band where the drummer gets to do fills in the middle of the verse.
Okay, that's what jazz is for.
Yeah.
Jazz and jam band. Now, I like to sneer at jazz because I get, it wakes up any dinner party. Just say, the problem with jazz musicians is that they all suck. Okay, now you've got a dinner party. Everyone's screaming and throwing plates at each other. Yeah. Now we got but actually that applies to jazz musicians. Jazz audience is the best audience, equal to jam band audience, because that jazz audience, they don't want to hear the song. They want to hear your chops. Yeah. They want you to play everything you got now all the time. They don't want you to, leave space for no. Everybody on stage, play everything you got now. And an audience that'll pay good money to watch that noodle, I will gladly go and play for those people. I did a jazz tour once with Stanley Clarke, where I discovered this fact that the jazz audience is the best audience. But they're
encouraging that.
Yeah, and they encourage all kinds of things that are just not allowed in pop music. And similarly, jam band, there's a bit of a song, and then you go off. And the audience came, and what they want, what they pay good money for, is it to be unrehearsed. They want to see fuck-ups. They want to see blind alleys. They want to see dead in the water, because that proves that it's never happened before. It's never going to happen. You were there the night when this happened, because when it comes together with Oysterhead, when Trey pulls out a chop, or Les Claypool finds a groove on the bass, and we all come together, we light up. The thrill in the audience is enormous.
This is the parallel to the jazz world, where it is unknown what's going to happen tonight. But even pop groups such as the Police and even the Who like to try things out. And that's, for the musicians, more exciting than playing the same show every night, like a Broadway gig. Some huge people do the same show every night. But when you're improvising, when you're able to look at each other and not know when the song is going to end or how, even the lighting person, the t-shirt people, the security guards know that something's off the rails here.
Yeah. And
I think the interest level goes up. Doesn't mean it's going to work out well. It might actually crash, but the moment is that everybody realizes we're here. It's that moment of, this is live, this is about to go wrong, or amazing.
Well, Sting used to, I think, looking back on it, I think he used to try and mollify my creative wildness by having sections in a lot of songs. Like in Roxanne, we would always walk, Bed's Too Big Without, various songs, we would go off and none of us would know what's going to happen. And Stingo would come up with something new vocally on his bass, and Andy would come up with, we would go, and nobody knew what was going to happen. And theoretically, that was supposed to get my rocks off, so that when we get back to the verse, I'm going to play the damn song, okay? You had your moment, now we're going to play the song, right? Well, I'd try, I'd do my best, and I would, having gotten my rocks off, I would be a little bit better disciplined, better behaved.
Well, speaking of better behaved, keep doing what you're doing. I think it's interesting and always fascinating. a Ben-Hur score, the Oysterhead thing, Animal Logic a while ago. There's always something happening, but your flavor, your mustard in the sandwich is always in the sandwich. And if people like it, like what you do, there's more of it.
There's plenty of it.
Yeah, no, especially this orchestral.
You like that shit? I got plenty more of that shit.
The Police Deranged tour is going on, or ongoing, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
And I encourage people to say, even if they don't know what it is, and they're not even sure, check it out. As I said, it's fun. It's not that serious. It's not like a thing where you have to be behaved. And you're not behaved, so it works very well.
Well, I go and I
that.
try and wake the audience up because they're sitting in a fancy concert hall with a fancy Philharmonic orchestra, and they feel. But I go and I wake the orcs up. First in rehearsal, I wake them all up. I go and befriend each and every one of them. I have my pickup lines for the viola lady,
Nice.
viola one, and I go to the woodwinds and I have my gag that gets, so that when we play the show, it features, and I interact with them. I shout at them. I talk to them. I get them to shout things back. It's very let your hair down, even though you're in a really fancy hall.
And you're doing guitar, and you're conducting, and you're back and forth. So it's not just, the drums is great,
No,
though.
mostly drums.
But people love
Just
that.
a little taste of guitar, a little taste of conducting, but they pay their good money to watch me bang shit.
It's like people doing their acoustic set. It gives it a break up and gives it something, but you get to play guitar and move around a lot, so that's good.
Yeah.
Keep doing it. Go see it if you get a chance. I highly recommend it as a great night of music. And if you like drumming and you like his type of drumming, there's a lot of it. So good luck with it.
You get quantity.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll see you sometime again.
Sure thing.
If you like this, please push the like button. If you want to hear more, you can subscribe. If you have any tapes to transfer, please let us know.